My husband and I met 6 years ago. We started out as just friends and came to realize we loved each other so much. I come from a really big family that has always been loving, open-minded, and supportive. I live in the United States and they are all in Ireland, but we are still close. I told my family about my husband and they were very accepting. My husband's family is from Colombia and they are really great people. They are really close and loving as well. However, his parents and sister are not very accepting or open-minded about many things. He has 2 older brothers who are, and he has a closer bond with them. He's told me since we met that his sister is very judgmental. When he told his sister about us, she had a problem with me, even without knowing me. And her husband made negative comments about me being Irish. Her husband is white, so their issue wasn't about wanting to keep the family only Colombian. Either way, my husband informed them that it's his life and his choice. Time passed, and it seemed that after getting to know me, they had come to accept me. I was being included in every event, including an out-of-town family reunion. When we decided to get married, everyone was happy from both families, except my husband's sister. She is the only one who had an issue with it. Again, my husband had to remind her that it's his life. A year later, we became pregnant with our first child. We announced the news to my family, and they were ecstatic. We announced it to my husband's parents, and they were equally ecstatic. The following week, we announced it to his sister and her husband. Her husband immediately lit up and congratulated us, but she just kind of went quiet and then turned to her mother and started an off-topic conversation. I was taken aback by her reaction, and my husband was completely hurt, but we said nothing and just finished the night as if it never happened. And we're both pretty focused on keeping the peace. A week later, my husband told his sister that she really hurt him with her reaction, and they had a long talk. Afterwards, she was completely supportive during my pregnancy. She checked on me constantly and even paid to throw a beautiful baby shower at the clubhouse in our neighborhood. I went into preterm labor and had to spend 2 weeks in the hospital before ending in a cesarean. It was very hard. But she was there through that as well and came to refill our fridge when we got home so we wouldn't have to leave. She has been an amazing aunt for nearly 2 years. Just before our son's 2nd birthday, we found out we are pregnant with our 2nd baby. We were surprised, since this time it wasn't planned, but still excited. We told my family, and as usual, they were extremely happy for us. However, my husband was hesitant to tell not only his sister this time, but also his parents. I was so confused, but he said that he knows they would all have a problem, and he wanted to wait until his brother came to tell them. I thought he was just overreacting. When his brother arrived, we went on a walk, and my husband told him the news. He was happy for us. When we got back to his parents' house, my husband told them he had news, but only his mother actually paid attention when he pulled out the ultrasound pictures. She immediately turned the pictures face down and started speaking to my husband quietly in what seemed like a worried voice. I couldn't hear her and asked my husband what was going on. Then his father and sister came over. By this time, I was frustrated, and I told them myself while my husband pulled out the pictures again. Immediately, his father started speaking in a very angry tone in Spanish only, and his sister took off upstairs. I was so upset by their reactions that I couldn't concentrate on translation, but I could tell by the back and forth of angry voices that it was nothing good. I got fed up and started collecting me and our son's belongings to leave. My son had followed my sister-in-law upstairs, so I went to get him. When I got up there, she was commenting about us leaving, and I said, "Yes, we're leaving. I'm very tired of every time we have happy news to share with this family, it's almost always met with a negative reaction. It's the first time I've ever spoken up to anyone in his family, by the way." She responded by screaming as loud as possible, "This is nothing to be happy about. You ruined my brother's life." At this point, I was looking at my son, who I was holding while walking towards the stairs, and he started tearing up and was about to cry. He had never been around anyone screaming or even arguing before, and he was clearly terrified. I didn't respond to my sister-in-law. Instead, I just went as quickly as possible to get out of there and into my car. She followed me all the way to the door, still screaming. I had tuned out most of what she was saying, but I could hear her calling me a beach numerous times. Also, her own son and her brother's 2 children were there watching this all happen as well, and they all looked equally upset. My husband was outside at my car with his brother, so he had no idea this was happening. But his parents did, and they didn't stop her or say anything. After I buckled my son in the car seat, I realized I had left my keys inside. When I went back in to grab my keys, she started screaming again. I was so stressed at that point, I couldn't even think straight to find my keys, so I decided it would be best to just send my husband in to look for them. As I was walking out, she followed me, causing a scene outside now, screaming, "You're bringing another child into this world to suffer." I turned around in shock and responded, "You literally leave your son regularly with your parents to go on holidays and to parties. Maybe spend more time worrying about how he suffers." Then I proceeded to my car. I hadn't even noticed her coming after me or my husband jumping in her face until I sat in the car and looked over. He was yelling back at her, "Shut the FK up and go inside." After all the horrible things she had been saying to me, she had the nerve to tell him, "How dare you tell me to shut up?" He repeated himself, and this time, she did in fact shut up and go back inside. The next day, I sent her a long text telling her how much it hurt me that she acted that way, and even more that she did it in front of all the kids. I advised her that I no longer feel safe around her and would not be allowing this type of person in my life or my children's lives. I also made it clear that I do not speak for my husband, and I don't come in between family, so whatever his choice is, I will accept and respect it. She responded apologizing, but immediately started blaming my husband for her behavior and anger. Neither my husband nor I have any idea why, but I don't even care. To me, an apology is taking full accountability for your actions without excuses or blame shifting. A few days later, her husband, who was not there when this happened, sent me a text asking if we could all 4 meet and talk, or just him and I, if I didn't feel comfortable being around her yet. I told him I would need time to consider it. He responded by telling me whenever I'm ready to let him know and that my sister-in-law is really upset. And then he repeated her words of blaming my husband for her anger. Part of me wants to resolve this for my husband and children, as well as curiosity on how they can possibly twist it to be my husband's fault. But a bigger part says I should just stay away from all of them because it's just become way too toxic. To add more information, 1. Neither my family nor my husband's family has any hereditary diseases. Our first son was born healthy without any issues, and all the tests and ultrasounds have verified that our unborn son is equally healthy. 2. My husband was only in one relationship before we met. She treated him badly and cheated. He has no previous children with her or anyone else. He was very hurt and stayed single for 2 years between their breakup and us meeting. 3. I was born and raised in Ireland on a family farm where we only spoke Irish. My family only spoke English when we would go into the city or have visitors that speak English. I did not learn English until later. When I get upset, I can't think or speak as quickly in English. I do speak Spanish. I learned from our visits to Spain. Colombian dialect is very similar. However, that doesn't help when you're so upset you can't focus. I assume it's the same when you learn Spanish first. My husband's father speaks English, but not proficiently, and his mother barely at all. So I don't believe they switched to speaking Spanish to hide their words. I believe they assumed I understood everything as usual. 4. Why my husband was hesitant to tell them about our pregnancy. Everyone in their family knows that my mother-in-law does not like either of my brothers-in-law's wives or my sister-in-law's husband. She's nice to them, but gossips behind their back. Maybe that's what she's been doing to me the entire time and has had both my husband and me fooled. Both of my brothers-in-law have 2 children each. And apparently, my mother-in-law was not happy any of the times they announced a new baby. My sister-in-law does have a fertility issue, and her husband has some sort of genetic trait that can be passed down. His aunt passed last year from it, and his mother is not far behind. Because of this, they did in vitro fertilization to weed out the issue. It took 3 or 4 tries. I'm not certain on the details, This was before I met my husband, and it seems rude to ask such private information. My brother-in-law rarely attends any family events because he does not get along with my mother-in-law and father-in-law much. I thought our mother-in-law and I relationship was different because I am more traditional like her. I do work, but it's from home. I do the majority of the housework and cooking. I only nurse, no formula. I do not buy baby food from the market. I make it fresh daily, and I am almost always available when they need me. Our son does not attend daycare. He is always with me or my husband, and we have only asked his parents to watch him a few times for a few hours in his 2 years of life. It's my sister-in-law that leaves her son with them regularly, not us. We enjoy spending as much time as possible with our son because you only get this time in their life once. Even when we go on holiday, we take him with us. We prefer not to go places where he cannot join us. I am also the one who encourages my husband to spend more time with all of them and keep in regular communication. When we met, he was close with his brothers, but barely spoke to his sister or parents. Even until this happened, they would contact me if he wasn't responding, knowing I would resolve it. My mother-in-law and father-in-law do disagree with us on discipline. We don't hit our son, ever. They believe in physical discipline. They have made several comments on this, but my husband and I have stayed firm that it is not how we will be disciplining our children. My husband's siblings all agree, even his sister. They grew up with that. I did not. 5. My husband and I talk about everything. He is not keeping anything from me. He does not discuss our business with his parents or sister because, as I mentioned previously, he says they are very judgmental, apparently dramatic as well. So when I say he's genuinely confused, it's true. It's more odd to me that people are less accepting that we have a great marriage and more willing to believe he's being dishonest or deceitful. Although I do get why some people would rather believe that. I have been hurt before too, so I understand how it may be hard to trust that there are good people. 6. Is his sister jealous? I really believe she is, but not because we have a better life or more money. She has confided in me a few times with odd takes. She has jokingly mentioned many times that my husband ruined her Halloween when she was 10, having to spend it in her princess costume at the hospital when her mom went into labor. She has also told me that her parents always take my husband's side for everything. She doesn't like any of his friends or his career choice. She is very posh, to say the least. Another odd thing, every birthday party she's had for her son is a big dramatic deal. She requests multiple people, including my husband, to come in costume for the themed party. The odd part, though, is her speech before blowing out the candles. It's the same one every year. She tells a story with tears about how she never had any friends growing up and how no one ever came to her birthday parties and how much it means to her for all her friends and son's schoolmates to be there. 7. Meeting with my brother-in-law. I'm still considering my options on this. Part of me is very curious about what excuse my sister-in-law could possibly have to blame my husband for her actions and what she could have told her husband to convince him. But part of me thinks he's confused too and just wants clarification himself due to one specific thing he said in his text. I'm also happy to meet or talk with you first privately to just feel the situation out because, of course, maybe I'm wrong. I copied that statement directly from his text. In the very rare conversations I've had with my sister-in-law's husband, he seems pretty aware that she is dramatic. He is typically level-headed, and in one conversation, he admitted to me that he prejudged me and was wrong. He apologized. In the same conversation, he told my husband he still saw him as a kid and had worried about what type of father he would be, but is impressed with how he has surpassed his expectations and is a great dad. My husband was a little offended, but I told him some people compliment differently. Anyway, he seems more like me a bit in the way that he tries to stay away from drama, but wants to be a peacekeeper. I've considered meeting with him and voice recording the conversation so I could discuss it with my husband without missing anything or repeating it wrong or in a biased way. Also, maybe I'm wrong about him and he will say things to me he wouldn't say in front of my husband or will deny saying. Another part of me just keeps feeling like I will be walking into a guilt trip situation or something like that. Is this really worth being stressed out even more? Will it change anything? Will it help me be less stressed? It feels like a gamble that I'm uneasy to risk my sanity over. He reached out on August 7th, and today is the 22nd, and I've not yet given him an answer outside of saying, I have to consider it. Now for an update. Something else that gives more insight into my sister-in-law's character. My son turned 2 in June. We were in the middle of moving and decided to have a birthday dinner at a restaurant we love nearby instead of a party due to most everything being in boxes. My sister-in-law, brother-in-law, father-in-law, and mother-in-law had just recently returned from a month-long holiday in Colombia. My sister-in-law's 40th birthday was in May, but she decided she wanted to celebrate the following month in Colombia. We weren't notified until it was too late to make arrangements to attend, and my husband took that as her not really wanting us there, especially since it was her husband that slipped up, telling us, not her or their parents. Either way, they returned the week of my son's birthday. When I reached out to her to let her know the time, day, and place, one day before, she asked me if we could choose a different restaurant since it was Colombian, and she said she was Colombian fooded out. I thought that was selfish since it was our son's birthday, and we'd never consider asking this of her. However, trying to keep the peace, I asked for suggestions. It got worse. She then asked if we could choose a place closer to where they all live, an hour away. She recommended a place where the seating would not accommodate everyone at one table. I kept trying to work with her until I finally just had enough of all the changes to convenience her for our son's birthday, and as nicely as I could manage, told her that it was all becoming too hectic, and I think we are just going to keep our original plans. She seemed annoyed, but came. She didn't bring her husband or son. My husband agreed that she was selfish with her requests, and he believes she went to me instead of him because he would not have entertained the idea for a second. He told me for the millionth time that she always wants everything to be her way and to be the center of attention. I have never had anyone or heard of anyone doing anything like this before. I guess I just didn't know how to handle it. Almost forgot. I hope I answered all the questions. I'm not trying to ignore or dodge any, but I didn't think I would get more than a few responses of advice, so I was not prepared. I also wasn't trying to leave out any details, but I thought I had typed so much already that people would be frustrated if I typed more, and some things I didn't think were important or relevant that it seems are, like paragraphs. My apologies. Several people have asked for updates. I don't know if Reddit automatically notifies people when I've updated or edited this, or if I have to do it manually. I'm not too familiar with how Reddit operates. A close friend of mine suggested I put my story out here to get unbiased opinions, so that's why I'm here. Just to add an additional clarification, some people keep commenting that I'm ignoring questions asked. I'm not. I run a full-time business from home while simultaneously taking care of my son. I just don't have the time to respond to everyone or immediately. Some have said this post is too long, while others have said there's not enough detail. I'm not sure what more I can add, other than telling a 6-year-long story or how to shorten this and still make the point needed. Some have said my husband is keeping things from me. He doesn't want me to find out. That can't be possible due to him actually being interested in what my sister-in-law's husband has to say. He believes maybe I should talk to him so we both can find out the excuse for blaming him. He has not spoken to his sister and told me that he is done with her after how she treated me and her behavior in front of our son. She has reached out to him via text, but he ignored her. Some have said maybe my husband has a secret life in Colombia. He was born and raised in America. I think you watch too much television. Some have said I should have questioned my sister-in-law in the moment or went off on her for her outburst. I had my son in my arms and felt the best course of action for his sake and the other kids around was to just leave as fast as possible and deal with it later. I will try to catch up tonight after I put my son to bed. Please bear with me. Again, I didn't expect this many responses and all I really puspire. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I'm just not buying it that your husband is clueless here. Nope, he needs to be completely honest with you. Was he planning on leaving you and then you got pregnant again? He needs to just tell you what his mother and sister are upset about. Regardless, I'd go completely no contact with his family. Not the apology. Update us, please. Comment 2. Not the apology, but your husband is very obviously leaving out some important information. I mean, he knew before you both even told them about the second baby that they would be upset. But then he's claiming to be just as confused? Nope, something's not adding up. Now, for the update. I'm back with an update about the family drama with my husband's sister. A few months have passed since the outburst at the park. A lot has happened since then, and I just want to give everyone an update on how things are going. I have been busy preparing for our new baby and handling my son's needs. He's been a handful lately, and with the baby coming soon, things have been a little overwhelming. But we are managing. Life has been pretty normal for us, besides the occasional drama with the sister, which I have been trying to avoid. So, about a month ago, my husband's family announced a big family dinner to celebrate my husband's birthday. I wasn't sure how I felt about going, considering how things have been with his sister, but my husband insisted that it would be good for the kids to celebrate with everyone. He said it was important for everyone to be there, especially for the kids, so we decided to go for his birthday and the kids' sake. When the day of the dinner arrived, we got dressed up and off we went. My husband, my son, and I were all excited to celebrate his birthday with his family. I was just hoping it would be a nice night with no drama. When we got there, the atmosphere was awkward, to say the least. There were brief, forced conversations. Everyone was on edge, probably because of what happened the last time we were all together. Luckily, my son was having a good time, so I focused on him. Then the sister arrived late, of course. She walked in and immediately started making snide comments about my parenting. I just tried to ignore her and focus on entertaining the kids. We sat down for dinner, and my husband's mother made a toast, highlighting how close-knit the family is. The sister rolled her eyes during the toast, and I felt myself getting more uncomfortable. I could tell my husband noticed too, because he kept trying to engage everyone in conversation to lighten the mood. After dinner, the kids played in the living room, while the adults gathered in the kitchen. The sister pulled me aside to discuss the issues between us. She claims she doesn't understand why I feel unsafe around her. She dismissed my feelings, saying it was just a moment of frustration. I tried to explain how her outburst affected my son and me, but she just kept talking over me. The conversation escalated when she accused me of being overly sensitive. My husband noticed the tension and tried to change the topic. He could see that we were not going to get anywhere with this conversation, so he suggested we all play a game. As the night went on, I overheard the sister gossiping about me to her husband. It was hurtful to hear her talk about me like that, especially after everything we had just discussed. Her husband approached me trying to mediate, but he ended up taking his wife's side. It was a little frustrating because I was hoping he would understand where I was coming from. The next week, I received a group text from the husband's family planning a weekend trip. Everyone was excited about it, and I was looking forward to some time away with everyone. But then the sister suggested that my family and I should stay home to avoid further drama. I was shocked. I couldn't believe she would suggest that after everything, my husband felt torn between supporting me and keeping the peace in the family. He didn't want to exclude his family from spending time with us, especially the kids. After talking about it, we decided to attend the trip, thinking it might help mend the rift. During the trip, the sister tried to engage me in conversations that felt forced and fake. I could tell she was trying to act like nothing happened between us. One evening, while everyone was gathered around the fire, the sister made another hurtful comment. I was tired of the passive-aggressive comments, so I decided to confront her in front of everyone. The confrontation escalated, and my husband stepped in to protect me. The sister stormed off, leaving the family dinner in a tense silence. The next morning, she refused to speak to me, creating an awkward breakfast. My husband expressed his frustration with his sister's behavior, but felt conflicted about taking sides. He didn't want to lose his sister, but he also didn't want to see me hurt. The sister responded with a long text filled with accusations, pushing me further away. I was done with the drama. The husband suggested seeking a family therapist for help, which I agreed to explore. The family trip ended with unresolved issues, and I'm not sure where we go from here. The situation is exhausting, and I'm hoping the therapist can help us work through everything. I just want to have a peaceful life for my kids and me. Thanks for reading, and I appreciate all the support I've received. To answer a few questions, my husband was supportive throughout these events, trying to balance family loyalty and protecting our family. He did suggest family therapy as a constructive way to address the ongoing issues with his sister. I have not had any direct communication with the sister or her husband since the incident on the trip. Regarding the upcoming baby, my son is excited to be a big brother, and we're preparing him for the changes ahead. We've also been focusing on quality family time to strengthen our bond before the new baby's arrival. Am I the idiot for wanting a divorce because my husband thinks intimacy solves everything? My husband and I are both 31, and we have been together since we were 19. We have one child who is 10 months old. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say this hasn't always been a thing, because that would be a lie. But ever since I had our child, this has become a constant issue, and I'm repulsed. Throughout our marriage, I have been the one pushing for communication. I always want to talk things out, whereas he wants to settle everything with intimacy. We are arguing, nothing some intimacy can't fix. We have something to celebrate, let's have intimacy. We are grieving, let's have intimacy and forget about it. He had a hard day at work, he needs to take it out on me sexually. And again, I put up with it, so I'm just as much at fault. But when I was pregnant and he started disappearing as often as possible, literally hanging out with his friends every single day and drinking probably 2 or 3 times a week, all the way up until I delivered the baby, I told him several times that I refused to accept intimacy in place of an apology anymore. He would come home drunk, see me angry, and just immediately start initiating intimacy. I started turning him down left and right, to a point where he felt like a fat piece of garbage, because I refused to sleep with him for weeks. But then things got better. I had the baby. Our communication became very good, which was an adjustment. I even agreed to sleep with him when I was only 5 weeks postpartum. But around the time the baby was maybe 7 months old, he started disappearing again. He was a great dad and partner when he was home, but he spent a majority of his time outdoors with his buddies. It caused a bunch of fights because he pulled the "I worked all day, I deserve some time" lines whenever I was irritated that he wasn't home. Eventually, I just stopped caring. I stopped saying anything. He noticed. He stopped going out at all. He refused to leave the house if it wasn't for work, and started trying to sleep with me again because, as I already stated, intimacy is the only way this man communicates. So this was his way of apologizing. I refused him every time. But last night he once again tried initiating, and I pushed his hand away. He said, "Come on, I know I messed up. I'm trying to make it up to you." And as soon as he said that, I told him I wanted a divorce, because I would rather find pleasure on my own for the rest of my life than be tied to a man who thinks his weenie is so great that it'll make me forget about everything. He starts crying, asks if I'm serious and if I really want a divorce. And I said yes. I told him that perhaps if he had tried to communicate with me without letting his body do the talking, then maybe we could have made it work. But I'm disgusted by the sight of him now. Now for an update. I am currently at my mom's house with my baby. He is blowing up my phone, explaining himself and telling me the why behind his actions. But I don't care anymore. My friends and family think I'm a fool for wanting to divorce so soon after having a baby. However, am I the idiot? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. What a time to be alive. I imagine most people would envy living in a world in which rereads, apology tactics solve every problem. I'm joking, like 95%. Your ex-husband is being unreasonable. Ironically speaking, forget him. Comment 2. Not the idiot, he's manipulating you with intimacy. You made the right call by leaving. Now stick to it and proceed forward with the divorce. There's nothing left here, and he's not going to change. No intimacy is this magical. Now for the update. A few days after my last post, I was chilling at my mom's house when my husband hit me up, asking to meet and talk. I was like, fine, whatever. I didn't expect it to change anything, but I was kind of curious about what he had to say. So we agreed to meet at this little diner near my mom's place, a spot we'd hit up all the time back in the day. It was super nostalgic, but not in a good way. When we sat down, I noticed he looked like a hot mess. The first thing out of his mouth was an apology. Like, dude, really? He went on about how he felt lost and just all over the place with being a dad. I kind of get it, but I was like, dude, what about me? I felt ignored and all alone during my pregnancy and after the baby was born. I said it straight up. He promised to change and even suggested we go to a parenting class together to, reconnect or whatever. I was just sitting there like, okay, sure. But the real talk didn't even start until I mentioned how hard it has been to bond with him since the baby came. He admitted he was drinking more than he should and that it was his way of coping. I mean, at least he was honest about that. But then I had to bring up his friends and how they seemed to matter more to him than his family. He kind of brushed it off, saying it was just hanging out. Typical guy answer. Then he suggested we go to my sister's wedding together as a family to show we're united. I was like, okay. He insisted it might help us get back to normal, whatever that means. A few days later, my sister called asking if I could bring my baby to the wedding. I was like, sure, but I was worried about how my husband would fit into the whole picture. I decided to give him another shot, so I told him I'd think about the parenting class. When the wedding day came, it was awkward, to say the least. Everyone was gossiping about my messed up marriage, and I just felt so out of place. To make it worse, my brother Jake and his wife Rachel were all over the place, showing off their baby bump. It just made me feel worse, During the reception, my husband was all over the place, trying to talk to me, but he spent way too much time chatting it up with his friends. I was getting more and more annoyed. So I went up to him and asked him to join me on the dance floor, hoping to reconnect a little. He said sure, but the whole time he was just looking over my shoulder at his friends. Like, really? On the way home, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I confronted him about his behavior at the wedding, and he was all like, I was just trying to have fun. But he admitted it upset me. Of course, that led to a full-blown argument. He accused me of not wanting him to have friends. I was like, are you serious right now? You need to prioritize our family, especially during times like this. Our baby started crying in the back seat, making the whole thing even more stressful. By the time we got to my mom's place, I was done. I told him to leave for the night. He was all pleading, saying he wanted to work on things. I stood my ground and said we needed some space for now. A week went by, and I got a message from one of his friends saying he was worried about him. The friend mentioned that my husband had been drinking like crazy and wasn't handling things well. That got me thinking. I started to wonder if I needed to take more serious action to protect my baby. It was a lot to consider, so I decided to hit up my mom and get some support on what my next steps should be. Edit. After talking with my mom, I realized I needed to be more careful. She noticed how unhappy I was and suggested I look into separating for a while. It seemed like a smart idea, so I did some research. I found out that I could rent a small place nearby without too much hassle. My mom helped with some funds and even came over to help me move with my baby. My husband didn't know anything about it yet, but I felt like it was the right step for us. Am I the idiot for calling my brother abusive after he ignored my daughter's asthma instructions? Wife and mom of 3, 10-year-old boy, 7-year-old boy, and 6-year-old girl. I'll provide some context of how I was raised because I think it helps explain some of the conflict. Like my daughter, I was also the youngest of 3 and the only girl. I love my dad. He's now deceased, but I now know and understand that many of his behaviors weren't healthy. He had an obsession with his kids being tough and got angry at us if we got sick, got hurt, or cried. I once broke my ankle playing volleyball, and he thought I was making it up for attention, so I walked around on a broken ankle for 3 days. He was also physically hurtful to my mom and to us kids, striking us, giving us the belt, and throwing things at us. It was difficult to come to terms with this because my dad was amazing in many ways. But I know now some of the things he did were unacceptable and impacted all of us. Sometimes with my kids, I worry I go too far in the opposite direction. I never yell at them and have a hard time punishing them. Luckily, they are pretty well behaved. My boys are much more go with the flow and rambunctious. But my little girl is incredibly emotional and sensitive, and she's 100% the baby of the family. She also has severe asthma. My husband and I both have it, and it causes her a lot of anxiety. We've had to take her to the emergency room several times, and she has even had to stay for several days on 2 separate occasions. My daughter has a lot of anxiety due to her asthma and likes to know where her inhaler is at all times, and for me to lay with her until she falls asleep, because her wheezing and coughing sometimes gets worse at night. My husband and I have taken her to specialists and even to a psychologist to help her manage some of this anxiety. A few months ago, I was at dinner with my older brother and his wife. We were describing our daughter's asthma and her anxiety, and he made a comment about how we baby her and how it might get better if we stop fussing over her so much. Basically, that she's making it up for attention. My husband, who is a doctor, explained that she isn't milking it and that this is a legitimate physical illness. My brother and his wife didn't seem to believe us, and I was annoyed at the time, but I let it go. Last weekend, my husband planned a weekend getaway for our anniversary. My brother and his wife offered to watch our kids, and they were excited to stay with their cousins. I gave my brother and sister-in-law specific instructions on how to handle the asthma, when and how often to give her the inhaler, what to do if she has any symptoms, and they said they would take care of it. We left on Friday, and on Sunday, I got a panicked call from my oldest son. He told me my brother wasn't giving my daughter her medication because she could live without it for a day. My son told me my daughter was extremely anxious and crying. I called my mother-in-law and told her to pick up my children right away, and my husband and I drove back immediately. Luckily, my daughter didn't have an asthma attack, and although she had some wheezing, her symptoms weren't out of control. Still, my mother-in-law, husband, and I were livid. My mother-in-law said my daughter was crying and extremely anxious when she picked her up and asked for her inhaler right away. I honestly had to convince my husband not to go over there and confront my brother right then and there. We certainly will never leave our kids with them unsupervised ever again, and I can't describe how upset I am with my brother. He asked us to meet to discuss things, and my husband and I reluctantly went to his house. I told my brother that what he did was unacceptable, that my daughter could have had an asthma attack that would require hospitalization or worse, and that his behavior caused her a ton of anxiety. He said he was right because she was fine without it for a day. I told him that his behavior towards my daughter was abusive, not only because of the physical risk, but because of her clear emotional distress over the situation, verified by my boys and mother-in-law. My daughter has been hospitalized several times, and her biggest fear is needing an inhaler and not having it, or not being able to breathe. My brother lost it and accused me of slandering him and asked how I could call him that when we lived through actual abuse. He also said that my education, I'm the only one in my family who went to college, made me lose all my common sense, and that I'm destroying my daughter by babying her so much. My husband and I left immediately and haven't spoken to my brother since. Now for an update. Yesterday, my sister-in-law called and said my brother was upset. I used the term abusive and said I owed him an apology for that, but acknowledged he was wrong to not give my daughter her inhaler. Was I the one in the wrong for saying that? Or is my sister-in-law right that I overreacted? I just can't stop thinking about what might have happened to my daughter, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive him. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the a-hole. I can relate to your daughter. I had asthma as a child, and one thing I didn't realize then that I do now is that I also would experience the same anxiety regarding not having my inhaler when I needed it. I had an incident where my dad took us to Disney, and he realized he didn't have my inhaler, and I instantly started having a panic attack. But at the time, I thought it was actually my asthma acting up. So I was freaking out even more, and we left Disney. My parents never realized I was having anxiety. So I agree. Your brother is an a-hole and was borderline being hurtful, causing your daughter distress that actually could have probably caused her to go into a severe panic attack that could trigger her asthma and then would need to go to the hospital. I'm so happy for your eldest son looking out for his sister. Comment 2. Not the a-hole. What he did was classic abuse and gaslighting. He took away an accessibility device she physically needs. Then he mocked her and undermined you, your husband, her doctor, and her faith in herself. She will probably have additional fear and trauma responses the next time she has trouble breathing. He did damage to her. That is abuse. Him not wanting to be called hurtful doesn't make his actions not hurtful. If he didn't want to be called it, then he shouldn't have done something hurtful, especially something that you had specifically told him what to do instead. That was a choice he made. Now for the update. A few weeks have passed since I confronted my brother over the whole inhaler situation. Things have been interesting, to say the least. My daughter has actually been doing well with her asthma management at home, thank God. I mean, she was already doing great before all this happened, but I guess it just put us on high alert or something. Anyway, my mother-in-law decided to host a family dinner to celebrate my husband's birthday. Yeah, everyone was invited, including the brother and his wife. So fun, right? I hesitated a lot, like a lot, but I knew the kids wanted to see everyone. So I thought, why not? For their sake, I'll put on my best fake smile. So we get to my mother-in-law's house, and right away, the atmosphere felt kind of awkward, but cordial, if that makes sense. Like everyone was acting like nothing was wrong, but you could totally tell something was off. My brother seemed really uncomfortable and was avoiding direct eye contact with me like crazy. His wife tried to make small talk, but even that seemed kind of strained. It was just so obvious that everyone was being super careful around us. Then, during dinner, my daughter needed her inhaler. My brother just casually asked if she really needed it. Like, are you serious, dude? I firmly replied that it was essential for her well-being, obviously. He shrugged it off and said she was just being dramatic. I could feel my blood boiling at this point. After dinner, the kids went outside to play in the yard, and I overheard my brother telling his wife that my daughter was fine without it. Like, what? Seriously? I confronted him in the kitchen and asked him to stop undermining me. He snapped back, claiming I was making a big deal out of nothing. At this point, tensions had escalated so much that guests turned to watch us argue. His wife tried to intervene, but that only made things worse, unfortunately. I ended up stepping outside to cool off, taking my daughter with me. My brother followed and insisted he was just trying to help. I pointed out that he was being dismissive of a real issue, and he had the audacity to accuse me of being overly sensitive and overprotective. I calmly stated that our children's health was not up for debate. I just walked away, leaving him fuming in the kitchen. The following week, I got a text from my sister-in-law, which was a surprise. We arranged to meet for coffee to discuss the family tension. During our chat, she expressed her concerns about my brother's behavior, and I shared the details of our argument and the importance of the inhaler. She totally agreed that he needed to acknowledge the situation. We decided to approach him together to resolve things because clearly he was not getting it when I spoke to him. At a family gathering for the kids' school event, my sister-in-law finally brought it up. My brother listened, but he was still being all nonchalant about the seriousness of the issue. So I stood firm and explained the risks of asthma without proper management. After a heated exchange, he finally admitted that he misjudged the situation. Thank goodness. We agreed to have a family meeting to discuss future childcare arrangements. He even suggested taking a first aid course together for a better understanding, which I thought was a good idea. So now the family meeting is set for the following weekend at my house. I guess we'll see how that goes. To answer a few questions, my relationship with my brother has always been good, though sometimes he is a bit overconfident. My sister-in-law and I have gotten along well too, until now. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.